Hey everyone, and welcome back to Crash Course World History. I'm your host, Swapnil. Today we're diving headfirst into not one but two of the most earth-shattering, paradigm-shifting events in human history, the French and Russian revolutions. Now you might be thinking, two revolutions in one video, isn't that like double the historical baggage? And you wouldn't be wrong. But trust me, these two revolutions, while separated by time and geography, are so intricately interwoven, so thematically linked, that understanding one without the other is like trying to eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with only one slice of bread. So buckle up, grab your metaphorical berets and ushankas, because we're about to embark on a wild ride through the tumultuous streets of Paris and the snow-swept squares of St. Petersburg, exploring the key factors that ignited these revolutions and their seismic impact on the world stage. Okay, let's rewind the clock to 18th century France. Imagine a country shimmering with extravagant palaces, opulent balls, and a monarchy dripping in more jewels than a rapper's teeth. But beneath this glittering facade, trouble was brewing. A financial crisis of epic proportions. You see, France, in all its glory, had a bit of a spending problem. Years of lavish royal expenditures coupled with costly wars, particularly the American Revolution, ironic, right, had plunged the nation deep into debt. Now, who had to foot the bill for all this royal indulgence? You guessed it, the commoners, the peasantry, the Third Estate, who were already struggling to keep their heads above water. Taxes skyrocketed while wages stagnated. Bread, the staple food of the French masses, became a luxury few could afford. As the economic chasm between the haves and the have-nots widened, so did the simmering resentment against the monarchy and the privileged few. This financial crisis wasn't just about empty stomachs, it was about empty promises. The French people, burdened by an unjust system, were growing increasingly disillusioned with the absolute monarchy that seemed more concerned with its own opulence than the plight of its people. And as we all know, a hungry, angry populace is not a recipe for social stability, it's a recipe for revolution.
France's pre-revolutionary tension stemmed from its rigid hierarchical social structure. At the top sat the First and Second Estates, the clergy and nobility. They enjoyed vast privileges, tax exemptions, and land ownership. The Third Estate, the pyramid's base, included everyone else. They bore the bulk of taxes and had little say in government. Imagine a giant, elaborately decorated cake. The privileged gorged on the best layers, leaving crumbs for the rest.
Let's talk about the intellectual kindling that fueled the flames of revolution, the Enlightenment. It was a gradual dawning, a slow burn of ideas simmering for decades. Thinkers like John Locke, with his radical notion of natural rights, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who championed the social contract, provided the intellectual ammunition for revolution. Their words, disseminated through pamphlets and salons, challenged the foundation of absolute monarchy.
Ideas are powerful, no doubt, but even the most revolutionary ideology can't fill an empty stomach. And in the years leading up to 1789, France was experiencing a hunger crisis of disastrous proportions. A series of bad harvests, exacerbated by outdated agricultural practices and economic mismanagement, led to a catastrophic grain shortage. Bread prices soared, placing even basic sustenance out of reach for many. Imagine entire families subsisting on scraps, children with distended bellies, and the gnawing fear of starvation becoming a daily reality. This wasn't just hunger, it was desperation, a slow-burning fuse leading to an explosive outburst. The monarchy, detached from the realities of peasant life, seemed indifferent to the plight of the starving masses. Marie Antoinette's infamous, and likely apocryphal, "Let them eat cake quip perfectly," encapsulates the disconnect between the ruling elite and the suffering populace. The food crisis wasn't just a physical crisis, it was a moral one. It exposed the glaring inequalities of French society, the callous indifference of the ruling class, and the utter failure of the system to provide for its citizens' most basic needs. And as the people starved, so too did their patience for the status quo.
Now let's talk about the man at the helm of this sinking ship, King Louis XVI. He wasn't exactly a tyrannical despot, but he wasn't exactly a visionary leader either. Indecisive, Often out of touch and more interested in hunting and locksmithing than governing, Louis XVI was woefully ill-equipped to navigate the maelstrom of crises engulfing France. He inherited a kingdom riddled with debt, inequality and simmering discontent, and frankly, he didn't have the stomach for the tough decisions needed to avert disaster. His attempts at reform were often too late, too timid, or easily swayed by the influence of his advisors or the Queen, the ever unpopular Marie Antoinette. Louis XVI's reign was a case study in how absolute power, when wielded without competence or compassion, can backfire spectacularly. He became a symbol of the monarchy's disconnect from the people, its inability to address their grievances, and its utter failure to adapt to the changing times. And as the French people grew increasingly disillusioned with their indecisive king, they began to imagine a future without a monarchy altogether. Desperate for solutions to the financial crisis, Louis XVI made the fateful decision in 1789 to convene the Estates General, a representative assembly that hadn't met for over 175 years. The Estates General was divided into 3 estates, reflecting France's rigid social hierarchy. The first estate, which was the clergy, and the second estate, the nobility, each got 1 vote, while the third estate, representing the vast majority of the population, also got 1 vote. You see the problem here, right? The third estate, energized by Enlightenment ideals and fueled by years of resentment, saw this as a chance to demand not just financial reforms but fundamental changes to the power structure. They argued for fairer representation, demanding that voting be conducted by headcount rather than by estate, which would have given them the majority. The king, clinging to tradition and pressured by the privileged estates, resisted. Tensions soared, and the third estate, emboldened by the support of reform-minded individuals from the other estates, took a radical step. Locked out of their meeting hall and fearing dissolution, the third estate, along with their sympathetic allies from the other estates, gathered in a nearby indoor tennis court on June the 20th, 1789. There, in an act of defiance that reverberated through the halls of history, they took an oath, vowing not to disband until France had a new constitution. This was a direct challenge to the authority of the king, a declaration that the power to govern rested not with the monarchy but with the people. This seemingly simple act, this oath sworn on a tennis court, was a seismic shift in French history. It marked the birth of the National Assembly, a legislative body claiming to represent the will of the French people. The tennis court oath wasn't just about a constitution, it was about the very idea of popular sovereignty, about the right of citizens to have a say in their own governance. It was a rejection of absolute monarchy and a declaration that France was entering a new era. The game, as they say, was on. The tension, already at a fever pitch, reached a boiling point on July 14, 1789. Rumors of royal troops amassing around Paris, coupled with the dismissal of a popular finance minister, ignited a wave of fear and anger among the Parisians. The Bastille, a formidable fortress and prison, loomed over the city as a symbol of royal tyranny. It held only a handful of prisoners, but in the minds of the revolutionaries it represented the arbitrary power of the monarchy. On that fateful July day, a mob of Parisians, armed with whatever they could find, muskets, pikes, cobblestones, stormed the Bastille, demanding weapons and ammunition. The battle was fierce, chaotic, and ultimately a decisive victory for the revolutionaries. The fall of the Bastille was more than just a military victory. It was a symbolic triumph of the people over the monarchy, a physical manifestation of the crumbling walls of the old order. News of the storming spread like wildfire throughout France and across Europe, igniting a wave of revolutionary fervor. The French Revolution, fueled by years of resentment, inequality, and intellectual ferment, had officially begun.
So there you have it, the tumultuous beginnings of the French Revolution. From financial woes to social inequality, from Enlightenment ideals to a hungry populace, the French monarchy dug its own grave, paving the way for a new era of liberty, equality, and fraternity. At least in theory. But the story doesn't end there. The French Revolution, like most revolutions, was a messy, complex, and often violent affair. In the next video, we'll explore the French Revolution's chaotic trajectory, its descent into terror, and its ultimate legacy. And then, we'll journey eastward to Russia, where another revolution, inspired by the echoes of France, would unfold with its own unique brand of drama, violence, and lasting impact on the world stage.